Scene opens inside a sleek, glass-walled office. Afternoon sunlight reflects off polished floors. David sits across from Kareem, his brother-in-law, once his closest friend, now a stranger in a tailored suit. Kareem leaned back in his leather chair, folded his hands, and smiled like he already won. "We don't hire failures like you," he said, slow, deliberate, like he was doing David a favor. The room went quiet. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. No gasps, no arguments, just silence. David didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He looked Kareem dead in the eyes and nodded once. "I understand perfectly." Kareem smirked, satisfied, mistaking calm for weakness. But what he didn't see was that inside David's mind, something had just ignited. Not anger, not shame, precision. A seed had been planted. Not for revenge, but for something far more powerful, reclamation. David stood, buttoned his jacket, and calmly walked out, not with a job offer, but with a plan. As David walked out of Kareem's office, the quiet hallway echoed with memories, sharp, uninvited, and heavy. Flashback begins. It was a decade ago. Kareem was 22, broke, and too proud to ask his parents for help. David, just 24 at the time, had a small apartment, a cheap couch, and a heart big enough for both of them. Kareem used to crash on that couch. Most nights he'd fall asleep surrounded by takeout containers and textbooks. David remembered watching him snore through deadlines and panic before exams. One night stood out. It was 3 a.m. They were sitting at the kitchen table, both exhausted, both surviving on caffeine and instant noodles. Kareem was working on his first business pitch for a class. His hands were shaking. His voice cracked. "I can't do this, man. I'm not like you," he cried. In David's kitchen, David reached over, handed him a tissue, and said, "You don't have to be like me. Just don't give up on you." And Kareem didn't. He passed. He pitched. And when he got his first internship, he screamed and hugged David like a brother. Flash forward. Now that same man who once wept under David's roof just looked him in the eye and said, "We don't hire failures like you." Irony has teeth. And sometimes the ones you raise come back to spit in your face. After the startup collapsed, there was no press release, no heroic fall, just silence. David lost everything. His office, his team, his name on the building, gone in weeks, taken by a hostile takeover that stripped his company to the bone. Investors ghosted, friends vanished, and Kareem? Not a single call, not a single text, not even a "you okay?" This was the same man who had once cried in his kitchen. Now radio silence, total emotional blackout. At first, David made excuses for him. He's probably busy. He doesn't know what to say. Maybe he'll reach out tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. David sat on his balcony one night alone, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. And the question finally came, loud and raw. When did brotherhood expire? What's the shelf life of loyalty when success disappears? There are betrayals that come with knives, but the worst ones come with silence. The dining room was always too warm, too bright, but somehow the air felt colder every time Kareem opened his mouth. Family dinners weren't what they used to be. They used to feel like Sunday blessings, laughter stories, Kareem and David trading jokes over mashed potatoes. But after David's company fell, something shifted. Kareem's jokes weren't jokes anymore. They were daggers dipped in honey. One evening, someone casually brought up David's first startup, the one that raised $2 million in 6 months. Before David could respond, Kareem chuckled and said, beginner's luck. Just 2 words, spoken with a smile. But to David, it felt like a slap with velvet gloves. Nobody said anything. Plates clinked, forks moved, silence pressed harder than any insult. And it wasn't the only time. Any mention of David's past wins, Kareem downplayed them. Any sign of David rebuilding, Kareem raised an eyebrow just enough to suggest doubt, not openly, just enough for it to sting. He was playing a quiet game, dismantling David's dignity one carefully placed comment at a time. And worst of all, everyone pretended not to hear it. Sometimes it's not the ones who hate you that destroy you, it's the ones who smile while they do it. Kareem never openly rooted against David. He never raised his voice, never made a scene. But that was the trick, wasn't it? Kareem didn't want to be seen as cruel. He wanted to be righteous, helpful, mature, above petty things. But the truth, Kareem didn't just want David to fall, he needed him to. Because as long as David succeeded, Kareem was just the man David helped off the couch. As long as David thrived, Kareem's own rise felt borrowed, secondhand, overshadowed. So he played it smart. Not sabotage, but subtle sabotage. Not hatred, but envy, disguised as indifference. He didn't attack David's ego. He eroded it slowly with faint praise, with polite silence, with jokes he could deny were jokes. And David finally saw it for what it was. Not bad luck, not miscommunication, but resentment dressed in loyalty's clothing. He didn't want to see me fail, David thought. He needed me to. Some truths don't come with a bang. They come quietly, like a door closing you didn't even hear open. It took David time. Time to stop making excuses for Kareem. Time to stop hoping he'd call. Time to realize that the silence was intentional, not passive, not forgetful, deliberate. And that realization, it didn't arrive with anger. It arrived with a hollow ache deep in the chest where betrayal makes its home. David had faced betrayal before. Bad clients, greedy partners, cold investors. But this was different, because this one wore the face of family. This one hugged you at weddings, then pushed you off the cliff when no one was watching. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the act itself, it's the slow death of trust that follows. The moment you stop asking, "Why didn't he help me?" and start whispering, "He never intended to," that's when it sinks in. The enemy isn't always across the battlefield. Sometimes he's sitting at your dinner table, and when silence finally screams, it doesn't sound like rage. It sounds like a heartbreaking, quietly. Revenge is loud, but justice is surgical. David didn't scream. He didn't go online, didn't expose Kareem on social media. He didn't even tell his wife, not yet, because this wasn't revenge. This was precision, and precision requires silence. He started quietly revisiting names he hadn't called in years, old colleagues, former investors, a board member he once helped avoid a PR disaster. People who still picked up when they saw his name flash across the screen. He didn't ask for anything, not directly. He just listened. He brought up Kareem's company in casual conversation, talked about market shifts, competitor growth, leadership gaps, and then he let them do the talking. Honestly, they've plateaued. There's been talk about bloated spending. He's not exactly a visionary. One seed, then another, then another. David wasn't planting doubt. He was watering what already existed. He wasn't shouting at locked doors. He was quietly collecting keys. This wasn't about hurting Kareem. It was about revealing who he really was to the very people he was fooling. You don't start a storm by screaming. You start it with a whisper in the right ears. David didn't schedule boardroom takeovers. He scheduled coffee, one-on-one, neutral ground, no agenda, no slides. Just two people and a quiet history between them. These weren't strangers. These were men and women who remembered David before the fall. People who once shook his hand across million-dollar deals. People who respected how he handled failure with silence, not scandal. David never criticized Kareem directly. He didn't need to. He simply asked questions that lingered. Have you noticed a slowdown in decision-making lately? How's morale at Kareem's division? Do you think leadership's adapting fast enough to market changes? He let the silence after the questions do the heavy lifting. In those pauses, trust shifted. Board members didn't see a man begging for a job. They saw a strategist, a stabilizer, someone who still understood the game but no longer needed to play it loudly. And in that silence, David reclaimed something Kareem never truly owned: credibility. David didn't raise alarms. He hired experts. He brought in a team of forensic accountants, quiet, discreet, ruthless with numbers. Their mission wasn't to destroy, it was to expose. They combed through Kareem's company like surgeons with scalpels, line by line, deal by deal, dollar by dollar. And what they found? Sloppiness disguised as confidence. Overpriced vendor contracts that mysteriously benefited Kareem's college roommate. Internal reports delayed for months, rewritten multiple times to hide underperformance. Marketing budgets bloated with consulting fees that no one could trace. Bonuses approved without board oversight. Red flags everywhere. Not fraud, but incompetence wearing a suit. And incompetence, David knew, was enough. He didn't wave the evidence like a weapon. He stacked it page by page, detail by detail, into a quiet dossier. No threats, no confrontation, just a chessboard, and one by one, he was removing Kareem's pieces. David didn't just prepare for a coup. He made sure no one saw the hands that set the trap. Not all leverage is loud. Some of it lives in sealed files, waiting. David had it, a secret. Something he'd stumbled on a year ago and tucked away in a quiet folder, never intending to use. Until now. One of the board members, Mr. Langston, had a son, a smart kid, brilliant even, but also reckless. Months ago, David had come across sealed documents tying the boy to a quiet bribery investigation, hush money, a ghost LLC contracts mysteriously redirected. No headlines, no trial, just whispers. David never used it, because he never needed to. But now he made a call, asked for a meeting, face to face, no emails, no paper trail. Over coffee, David didn't threaten. He didn't mention the documents. He spoke of loyalty, of legacy, of companies that needed real leadership, not fragile egos in tailored suits. He let the silence speak again. And when Mr. Langston looked up, brows tight, eyes unblinking, he understood. Not fear, but awareness and agreement. David didn't blackmail the man. He trusted him to make the right call with the full picture in mind. Because sometimes the sharpest move is letting someone save face while still folding to your hand. It started with one vote. Mr. Langston didn't say much, just nodded during the next closed-door meeting. But in that nod, a tide shifted. One vote in favor of a leadership change. Then a second. Another board member, an old friend of David's from his early investment days, quietly signaled his support. No applause, no announcements, just settled changes in posture, questions in emails that used to be praise, doubts where there was once loyalty. 2 out of 3, that's what David needed. One more vote, and Kareem's grip on the company would unravel. But time was thin. Too many whispers can become noise, and noise draws attention. David knew if Kareem sensed what was happening, even for a second, he'd rally the board, spin the narrative, play the victim, and shut everything down. This was no longer just a plan. It was a countdown. Each day felt tighter, each meeting riskier, each smile David gave calculated. Will today be the day someone asks too many questions? Will Kareem smell the smoke before the fire ignites? 3 votes, that's all it would take. And yet, those final 48 hours felt like walking across glass in complete silence. The room was silent, and somehow that silence was louder than any boardroom argument David had ever witnessed. 10 chairs, 10 decision makers, 1 agenda. Behind the polished oak table, the board members sat, files in front of them, expressions unreadable. Kareem wasn't there. This wasn't a meeting he was invited to. This was about him. The chairperson cleared her throat. Let's proceed. And one by one they spoke. Some voices trembled, some stayed cold professional, but none of them defended Kareem. No one mentioned his vision, no one said, give him more time. The room had already made up its mind long before the words caught up. David didn't speak. He didn't need to. This wasn't his performance. This was his result. When the last vote came in, the final voice, slow but certain, I. There were no gasps, no applause, no celebration, just a line written in the minutes of the meeting. Effective immediately, David Wells is to be appointed interim CEO, pending board review. He had no champagne, no camera crew, just the slow inhale of a man reclaiming everything without ever raising his voice. Kareem entered the building like he owned the air inside it. Tailored navy suit, gold cufflinks, shoes that clicked with confidence on polished marble. His assistant trailed behind, juggling papers and phone calls. He didn't look left or right. Why would he? This was his kingdom, the place that bent when he walked, paused when he spoke. Except today, it didn't. The security guard at the front desk didn't rise to greet him. The receptionist didn't offer her usual morning smile. In fact, she didn't even meet his eyes. Kareem's brow furrowed slightly. Not enough to panic, just enough to notice. As the elevator doors opened, no one made room. No one joked. No "good morning, boss." Just a quiet, heavy air. He smoothed his tie, brushed it off. They're probably just busy, he thought. But even the silence felt like it was watching him. And what Kareem didn't know was that his name had already been removed from the directory. That the office he was about to walk into no longer belonged to him. Kareem stepped off the elevator like a king arriving home, until he saw her, Maya, his longtime executive assistant, standing at the glass doors of his floor, waiting. But she wasn't smiling. She wasn't holding his coffee. She wasn't even walking toward him. She just stood there, hands clasped, eyes hesitant. "Mr. Wells," she said softly, "the new CEO wants to see you." Silence. Just for a second. Kareem blinked. Once, then laughed short and sharp like a bark. "The new CEO," he scoffed. "What, my brother-in-law, David?" He shook his head. "You're joking, right?" Maya didn't flinch, didn't correct him, didn't even look surprised. That silence again. It crawled under his skin. He straightened his cuffs, walked past her without another word. Let's see what this clown has to say. Still confident, still Kareem. But for the first time, his footsteps didn't echo like power. They echoed like footsteps walking toward the end of a story he never saw coming. Kareem pushed the door open like he always had, like it would bow for him. But this time, it didn't, and neither did the man sitting behind the desk. David, calm, composed, his fingers steepled, wedding ring glinting under the soft light of the office Kareem once ruled. For a moment, just a moment, Kareem froze. Something in his brain tried to compute what his eyes were refusing to process. And then came the line. Kareem narrowed his eyes. "You're in my chair." David didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just spoke quiet, sharp, final. "No," he said. "You were in mine." Silence. Longer this time. The kind of silence that stings more than shouting. The kind that says you didn't just lose a seat, you lost a kingdom. Kareem stepped forward, voice shaky now. "What the hell is this?" David slid a folder across the desk. Not fast, not dramatic, just controlled. Inside board votes, performance audits, evidence, authority, all in black and white. David didn't raise his voice because he didn't have to. Kareem wasn't just standing in front of a desk. He was standing in front of consequences. David didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply slid the folder across the desk, slow, deliberate, final. Kareem stared at it. For a long second, he didn't move, as if touching it would make it real. But curiosity, or maybe dread, finally won. He opened it. Page 1. Misallocated budgets, hundreds of thousands redirected to consulting firms with no traceable deliverables. Page 2. Mid-level managers resigning in waves. Emails about burnout toxicity and a lack of vision at the top. Page 3. Delayed expansion projects. Markets missed. Competitors gained ground while Kareem was too busy playing king. Each page was a cut. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp. And with every turn, Kareem's breath shallowed. His fingers began to tremble. The smirk gone, replaced by the look of a man realizing he'd built his empire on sand. David said nothing. He just watched. Because this moment wasn't about humiliation. It was about revelation. Kareem kept flipping pages until his hands started to shake, until there was nothing left to flip, no excuse left to offer, no version of the story where he still won. He looked up at David, eyes wide, voice caught in his throat. But David didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't say, "I told you so." He simply pressed the intercom. "Security," he said. "Escort Mr. Wright. Kareem off the premises." The pause was short, but felt like an eternity. Kareem stood frozen. "You can't be serious," he whispered. But David didn't blink. The door opened. 2 security officers stepped in. Not aggressive, just final. Kareem didn't scream. He didn't shout or fight, because there was nothing left to fight for. His kingdom had dissolved, and no one was coming to save him. As he walked out, shoulders trembling, eyes cast down, no one said goodbye. No one looked up. No one whispered, "I'm sorry." It wasn't just silence. It was a silence that crushed the air around him. The office was quiet again, but this time it belonged to him. David stood by the window, the city sprawling beneath him like a chessboard he'd finally mastered. The desk behind him wasn't just wood and polish anymore. It was earned. The phone rang. He didn't rush to answer it. Caller ID home. He picked it up, pressed it to his ear. Her voice came through, steady, soft, knowing. "I warned him," she said. "I told him if he came for you, he'd regret it." There was a pause. And then, "I'm proud of you." David didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the city lights, flickering, lives moving the world unaware of what had just shifted. And in that stillness, he realized something. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't even vindicated. He was free. The city kept moving. Cars, people, deadlines, life. But in one corner office, behind quiet glass, a man stood still. David. Not the failure they once dismissed, not the underdog they pitied, but the man who never needed noise to be heard. He turned from the window, looked around the office that had once rejected him, and then he whispered not to anyone, just to himself. Some men build their legacy with words. I built mine with silence. He walked back to the desk, his desk, the same one Kareem once sat behind, thinking titles made him untouchable. He thought I was weak because I was quiet, David said, but he never understood. He paused, fingers brushing the edge of the chair, eyes calm, voice low. Silence is where power breathes. And with that, he sat down, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to lead from stillness. And that was the loudest legacy of all. Not every victory is loud. Some are quiet, measured, earned in silence, and sealed with restraint. David never raised his voice. He never made a scene. He didn't scream for justice or beg for validation. He simply became undeniable. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. Wait while they underestimate you. Wait while they laugh. Wait while they forget what you're capable of. And when the time is right, you don't need revenge. You don't need applause. You just need a plan, a steady mind, and a reason bigger than your pride. The lesson? You don't have to scream to reclaim your name. You don't have to fight with fists to earn respect. All it takes is clarity, patience, and silence sharp enough to be heard without a sound. You don't have to fight loudly to win. Some of life's most powerful victories aren't won with fists or fury. They're won in quiet rooms with calm hearts and clear minds. This story teaches us that dignity isn't always defended in the spotlight. Sometimes it's reclaimed in silence through patience, strategy, and self-respect. In a world where noise often gets attention, remember this: power doesn't always speak. Sometimes it watches, it waits. And when the moment comes, it acts without asking for permission. So if life ever makes you feel small, dismissed, or forgotten, don't explode, don't rush, just pause and prepare. Let your silence become your strength. Let your comeback speak louder than your pain. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own silent battles and the power of quiet resilience, then this channel was made for you. Subscribe to Whispers of Life. Here, we don't just tell stories. We find truth between the lines. We honor the strength it takes to rise without noise. And if you believe that power lives in patience, that the best revenge is becoming undeniable, then click subscribe. Turn on notifications and join us for the next story that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Because your silence might just be your greatest legacy.